Jynx is not an impressive Pokemon by modern standards. Ice Psychic is a horrendous defensive type combination, and with the rise of offensive Ghost and Dark types in the franchise over the years, as well as priority moves, hazards, and the overall rise in Pokemon's speed stats, Jynx is not a very desirable choice. But in the early generations, Jynx was once an offensive powerhouse, especially in Gens 1 and 2. In Gen 1, Ice Psychic was not a bad type combination. In fact, it was really excellent, and Jynx was one of the best sleep-setting Pokemon in the game, thanks to its move Lovely Kiss and its high speed stat for the time. After landing a sleep, Jynx could also hit really hard with stab-boosted Ice Beam, Blizzard, or Psychic. Gen 2 is a metagame known for its defensive gameplay, centering around extremely tanky Pokemon that are difficult to break through, like Snorlax and Rest Zapdos. Jynx is a rare Pokemon in Gen 2 that generates significant offense, and is a cornerstone of many aggressive strategies. Lovely Kiss is still an asset preventing the enemy from moving, as is access to Thief for item removal, and those incredibly hard-hitting Stab, Ice Beam, and Psychic. Gen 3 would be the first dip in viability for Jynx though. Jynx would fall from OU to UUBL in this game, and its flaws started to bubble up to the surface for the first time. Super effective attacks against Jynx were uncommon in the first two games, and it was actually a surprisingly bulky Pokemon that could live common hits without much problem. But now Rock-type attacks were significantly more common, with the rise of threats like Tyranitar, Aerodactyl, Salamence, and Metagross. Ice and Psychic Stab is less effective in a world where Metagross and Jirachi exist now to resist them. More Pokemon threaten Jynx, and it is no longer able to enter the field in the mid-game and apply pressure like it used to. But there is still merit to using Jynx in Gen 3 OU, and it has always occasionally been seen as an aggressive lead. Jynx has solid lead matchups. The most common Salamence lead set is slower than a max speed Jynx, and threatened by ×4 super effective damage from Ice Beam. Zapdos hates seeing Jynx lead, since Ice Beam is incredibly threatening. Anything else slower than Jynx, like Metagross, Skarmory, or Suicune, will likely be put to sleep by Lovely Kiss, granting excellent early momentum. And after this, Jynx can become an absolute monster. If you land a sleep, you can start substituting and Calm Minding, and destroying everything with Stab Ice Beam, even resistances if given enough turns to set up. Jynx is infamous for sometimes just being able to win the entire game single-handedly from turn 1, or at least causing a ridiculous amount of damage before it goes down, making for an easy cleanup job. Jynx has often been considered an inconsistent gimmick though. Lumberry is a common option on leads as counterplay to sleep moves. If you are ever up against a Tyranitar with a Lumberry, you are just screwed, and this is perhaps the most common lead in Gen 3. Lovely Kiss will be cured by the Lumberry, and you faint in a single hit, since your defense stat is non-existent. Blissey can also stop Jynx quite easily, 1v1ing the Pokemon with seismic tosses and shrugging off damage. But sometimes you can actually use interactions like this to your advantage in competitive Pokemon. Since Jynx invites these responses to it, why not build around this and punish them? Players started to realize that using Ice Beam against Tyranitar was a good move rather than risking Lovely Kiss against a potential Lumberry. After the Ice Beam damage, every kind of Tyranitar set will faint to a follow-up Dugtrio, and Tyranitar will always take this trade since it wants to eliminate Jynx from snowballing too much. This is a bit like a gambit. Jynx can sacrifice itself to enable a guaranteed Tyranitar elimination and enable strategies like Weather Clear. The same is true of Blissey. Often Blissey is a team's only answer to the early Jynx rampage, so it will always come in. What if you just Ice Beam against Blissey repeatedly until you die, since they have to stay, and this also guarantees a Dugtrio follow-up. Many teams will hinge on eliminating Blissey to enable special attackers like Jirachi, Zapdos, or Kingdra. Jynx can lure in Blissey very reliably and sacrifice itself for that guaranteed game-winning trap. So sometimes in the right matchup, Jynx will cause a huge amount of damage early game. Or if they have these responses to Jynx, they are just lured in and eliminated, which progresses your game plan in a different way. Quite a good strategy. Some players took it further. Why not lean into this game plan of luring in specific targets with Jynx? Cutting Calm Mind and Substitute in favor of Mean Look and Perish Song started to become more popular. This is another way to eliminate an incoming Blissey without even needing the Dugtrio. Mean Look will trap them, and in 3 turns, Perish Song will eliminate them. And this actually allows Jynx to eliminate some other targets that Dugtrio can have trouble against. Snorlax can be a horrible matchup for special offense teams. Dugtrio can be built to handle a Blissey Ice Beam and eliminate the target, but Dugtrio has no way to live Snorlax's attacks. If Snorlax is their special wall, it takes a lot more effort to bring it down. But Jynx can Perish Song against Snorlax that comes in to respond. You will faint in the process, but Dugtrio can then come in, trapping Snorlax until its inevitable doom. Substitute can then be used on Dugtrio to wait out the Perish Song turns and guarantee an elimination against their primary special wall. It may seem weird to use Substitute on a Pokemon with a Choice Band equipped, but for this interaction, it is worth it. So Lead Jynx has evolved into being this lure to enable certain offensive strategies. And a team style that Jynx actually works very well on here is Boom Spam, a rather funny style of team in its simplicity, but one that is surprisingly effective. These teams aim to trade with the enemy using multiple explosion Pokemon or other effects like Destiny Bond, setting up for their last Pokemon to be a Rest, Sleep, Talk Suicune, who will clean up in the endgame. Jynx is a fantastic opener for these kinds of teams. The Mean Look Perish Song strategy is another way to trade for that Suicune endgame, and the momentum of Sleep also makes a lot of sense on this hyper-aggressive style of team. Luring and eliminating Snorlax and Blissey also works well with this since they can wall Suicune. In my Invitational Gen 3 tournament, the Gymvitational, this sort of Jynx strategy has now been used 6 times with pretty impressive results. It seems that the best of the best in Gen 3 OU are putting their faith in Jynx in this high-stakes tournament with money on the line. In this game between high-level competitors Starmaster and Crystal, a Jynx Boom Spam team was used with a very interesting moveset choice alongside it, a Rain Dance Claydol. Jynx does a good job luring and eliminating Tyranitar with the sacrifice into a Dugtrio follow-up. With Tyranitar gone, you can clear Sandstorm with Rain Dance, which makes Suicune way stronger, since it can now heal with its leftovers. And you have that brief period of enhanced water-type damage from the rain, which can come up in a fast-paced game. This team got a convincing win, and other high-level players such as ABR, Conflict, and Super Epic Ampharos have also been really favoring these sorts of Jynx offense teams in this tournament. A Pokemon that was once viewed as a cheesy gimmick has been optimized and built around to create quite a consistent and effective strategy. These explosive Jynx teams have been catching people off guard and winning quickly. It will be interesting to see how players adapt and prepare against this new flavor of offense that seems to be on the rise. The biggest exploitable flaw of Jynx is that if it is ever forced to switch out on turn 1, it will have a lot of trouble getting any value ever again. Jynx really relies on these advantageous turn 1 interactions and the early momentum that stem from them. Its defenses are horrible, and there is almost nothing it can switch in against safely. The worst possible lead matchup for Jynx is Jolly Choice Band Salamence. With a Jolly nature to boost speed, Salamence just barely outruns Jynx and can easily one-hit KO. With no information on the very first turn of the game, the Jynx player is inclined to just use Ice Beam here, since most Salamence sets are not this fast, and switching out is such a disaster for them. They lose Jynx with no reward, and the game is off to a horrendous start. Maybe we'll see this anti-Jynx set rise up in response to the new Jynx wave. Another noteworthy trait about Jynx is that she is an ice type, meaning she is feeling rather cold most of the time. Jynx would really benefit from some sort of clothing item to patch up this shortcoming, perhaps a hoodie with a humorous image of a gaming koala on it. Luckily for her, such an item is readily available on jimothycool.com, along with various other fashionable pieces. Thank you.